I don't know who's prettier, him or his wife. He ride that one interview flying his own helicopter. It's so cool. I thought he was James Bond coming out.
What? What are you talking about?
Well, that article I had on the front page of this issue, which covered the documentary that's been out. He arrived at that interview flying his own helicopter.
Nice.
The picture ended up being too small, so he probably didn't see it.
Yeah.
Are the commissioners, they'll all be there, right?
Yeah. So.
Is Jay coming? Who's sitting here?
No, what you?
Yeah, all right, I didn't know if Jay was gonna be here.
No, I don't think so.
It's usually the town manager is Jay, so I'm the town
He
manager.
loses his seat. You rank.
That's why you get the pictures.
Yeah.
Really good pictures, man.
So there's like Channel 5, Channel 7, Channel 9.
They're all here?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
We'll have to watch the news tonight,
Yeah.
or tomorrow morning.
Never do mind, folks. You might be able to just keep that button on once you press it.
Hey,
And then you'll have to make sure you press your red button.
do you have a seat? Do you have a seat for Mrs. Coon?
Yeah, these are reserved.
Okay, maybe she can be told. She's standing up there.
Oh, okay.
She's standing
Is he
up.
coming?
The blonde, yeah, and he's over there now, so you might let her know she can sit down.
See how many people are watching. 23 already.
23 watching. Oh, good. Well, this is a good group here, so. It's a tough one for me to report on, because I don't have another issue until September 10th.
Jim and Ferry and your mic's still on. Hi, everybody. Everyone's quiet waiting for you.
Take your mask off, Brown. Who knows? What do you want?
Oh, that's right here.
All right, I think all of our speakers are here now, so we can get started. Thank you very much for coming. I'm Link Hoeing, the chair of the Fair Access Committee, which was created by the town of Poolesville to press for fair treatment and services and programs in our area. We're here to discuss the closing of White's Ferry, its impact on our town and region, the future of the ferry, and efforts to move forward from here. We are not here to focus on the private negotiations or debate those issues. That's not our purpose in this meeting at all. Most of you know, who've lived out here for a long time, that the ferry is a vital part of the Western County, and Poolesville in particular. It connects Route 107 to Poolesville, which is our main street in a very real sense of the term. And while the number of cars that go across every day can seem like a small amount, 800, for a town like Poolesville, which has a lot of small businesses, a lot of family-owned businesses, the impact of the traffic flow reduction has been significant. The ferry also uniquely fits our historical area and the ag reserve because it meters traffic effectively. So it does allow traffic to come across, but not a lot of traffic, so the rural area we have gets preserved. And the ferry is also a living history, when you think about it, of what the C&O Canal was and the river was back in the early days. So at one time, there were 100 ferries operating on the Potomac River, and they contributed a lot to the economy here and allowed farmers to take stuff down to Washington, D.C. and up the other direction. So they were a vital part of making the C&O Canal successful in its early days. So tonight, we will hear from essentially 3 panels or tranches of speakers. First, we will hear from Chuck Kuhn, the new owner of the ferry, then from a series of government leaders to talk about what they're doing on the issue, and finally from local leaders who can tell you what the impact has been in Poolesville and the surrounding area. We will allow questions to be asked from the audience. We have 2 people here tonight that will hand out cards. If you hold your hand up, they will give you a card, and one is Maria over here, and Catherine Beliveau is here as well. She's back there. And they have pens too, so you can write the questions, and I, as a moderator, will ask all the questions I can. So let me kick it off. We're also trying to make sure that we can, that these speeches are 3 minutes or so we have time for questions. And seeing David here, I want to make a joke about politicians going on longer than 3 minutes, but I'm sure he will adhere to our guidelines. He's not the only one. I did it myself. I was in Congress for a long time, so I tend to go on too. So tonight I want to start off with Carrie Cook, who's our president, and she will introduce the night and also introduce a lot of our guests and welcome her to the podium.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us here in Town Hall or from the comfort of your own home as we're live streaming this tonight. The town of Poolesville is really happy to be able to host this forum to give our newest friend in the neighborhood, Chuck Kuhn, a chance to present his vision for the future of White's Ferry. I just wanted to recognize the local elected leaders who are here with us. Our Maryland District 15 Delegate David Hidalgo Fraser is here. Thanks for joining us. We have Gray Yashup, who is joining us as a representative from Congressman David Trone's office. So thank you for joining us. Thank you. And also Caleb Kirshner, Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. Thank you so much for being here tonight. All of my colleagues on the Poolesville Commission, thank you for being here. Thank you, Link Hoeing, the chair of our Fair Access Committee, for coordinating this entire evening. And we have a lot of high-level staffers from Montgomery County and Loudoun County here. So I just want to thank all of you for coming. I know that some of you will speak tonight as well. So my family has been using White's Ferry pretty much ever since we moved here. And my first time crossing the Potomac from Maryland into Virginia was the first weekend that I came out to look at homes to purchase here in Poolesville. My husband and I came out, and see, I'm married to a civil and environmental engineer. He's a sailor and a boat guy. And He grew up in the surrounded by water on all three sides town of San Francisco. And when he went to college to study marine biology, he found himself in field classes on a lot of boats. And he was much less interested in the marine life and much more interested in the mechanics of the boat moving through the water. So when he hooked up with this Marylander, we decided to look for a home in Poolesville, and he immediately said, we're definitely going to check out that ferry. White's Ferry is indeed a major transportation link. It gets us to work, to play, to shop, to see friends and family. It carries SUVs and small sedans and moving trucks and motorcycle tours and bicyclists and even the occasional hiker. It gets us where we need to go, and boy, it's a whole lot prettier than getting on the Beltway. It's also a living piece of history. Not many infrastructures can claim a two-century run. That means that White's Ferry is about the same age as our nation. So now I'm going to introduce to you the new owner of White's Ferry. He's also the owner of JK Moving Services. He and his wife Stacy have done a lot in the area of conservation easements in their efforts to preserve open spaces. They partner with food pantries through their JK Community Farm. They're no strangers to historic preservation. And Chuck is, most importantly, committed to getting that beautiful crossing over the Potomac up and running again. Chuck Kuhn.
Really nice to be wearing a mask again. Thank you all for being here, and thanks for inviting me out. And my wife Stacy's here with me tonight, and she's my partner in the ferry, and I guess my partner in life. It's as mentioned, my full-time job is JK Moving Services. We're headquartered in Loudoun County. I grew up in Northern Virginia. I used this ferry as a child to come over here and play sporting events, and had a lot of great memories. Raising our children, we've used the ferry on a number of occasions to come over the river for a number of different sporting events and different holidays and reasons. Just to jump right into it, we got involved in the ferry because we thought it was a very important piece of transportation for the community. We thought it was a very important piece of history, and to be honest, I couldn't stand to watch the fight anymore. I didn't know Herb Brown and his family, but I knew how the ferry operated, and I knew the service they were providing to the community. And listening to the fight, hearing the fight, watching it in the papers, and then seeing the ferry get shut down, I thought was just absolutely unreasonable and inexcusable. So operating a moving and storage company during a pandemic wasn't challenging enough, so I got together with Herb and figured we'd invest in the ferry. And investing in the ferry was exciting, and I'm still excited about it, and I want to make a commitment to myself and to everyone in this room. The ferry will run again, right? Yes. Thank you. Thank you. And I want to thank the Browns for everything they did for the duration that they did it. Running that ferry, as you can imagine, is no easy feat. It's 24 hours a day to a certain degree. It's 7 days a week, and it's not easy. But it's important to all of us, or you wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be here. The other thing I'd like to mention is I'm not a political guy, and I really know nothing about Maryland politics. I couldn't tell you who's a Republican, who's a Democrat with respect to the board and the administration. I will tell you that the Maryland politicians, the Maryland Montgomery County Board of Supervisors, the staffs, Poolesville, have been amazingly supportive, and thank you, and we all should thank them. As you all know, at times that's a thankless job. They've worked very, very hard to support the Browns, to support me, and getting this ferry, to support you, getting this ferry open. Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, they've been extremely supportive. The Loudoun County staff has been supportive. This has been a crazy challenge, and as I mentioned earlier, I watched this fight from the sideline, and I like to be relatively optimistic, and maybe sometimes I'm a little overconfident. And I thought, the Browns are too close to this fight. Some outside thinking might look at this differently. Where the Browns are caught up on some technical issues, I don't have that history with the ferry. I don't have that history with the Virginia shoreline owner. I'm sure we can get to a table and, man, this thing will be rolling like this. Well, my hat's off to the Browns. It wasn't that easy. I might have been a little too optimistic. I can assure you I put forth all of the effort that Stacy and I could put forth to work together with the Virginia shoreline to get this ferry opened in some reasonable timeline and reasonable fashion. I hate to admit it, I had to say uncle. And I could not get there from here, regardless of our offers, our attempts to try and educate and inform with respect to the economics of the ferry. And there was just no reasonable conclusion to the negotiations, regardless of what you might find on Facebook pages. Believe it or not, you can't believe everything you find on the internet today. So we appealed to Loudoun County, and we appealed to Leo Rogers, who's the county attorney, Tim Hemstreet, who's the town manager, and to the Board of Supervisors. And Caleb, Supervisor Kirshner, is here, and he'll talk more to it. But the county, Loudoun County, with the support of Montgomery County and the state of Maryland, initiated the study that you've read about in the paper. The study is underway. It's for real. It's going very well. And this matter will be in front of the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. The real fate of this ferry is going to lie in the hands of the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors. If the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, after they review the study that they've commenced, supports eminent domain, we will get control over the Virginia shoreline and this ferry will open. I'm very, very confident. I was confident earlier, don't forget, but I am very, very confident that the board in Loudoun County understands the importance of this ferry to Loudoun County commerce. I think they are well aware how important it is to the state of Maryland, Poolesville, Montgomery County, and you. So I think we're months away from having success with eminent domain, if you ask me. And the moment we get control of that Virginia shoreline, we've got a cable that's standing by on the ferry property. It's going to take us a matter of hours to get the cable reconnected, and we will get the ferry moving. The ferry is going to have to rebuild itself. We've been very fortunate to retain the remaining staff members that have been there and hanging on, waiting for this ferry to open, but we're about 10 employees short. And when we restaff the ferry, it's not like putting an ad in the paper and grabbing 10 hardworking people that want to get to work. We need boat captains. We need licensed boat captains. So where we have a staff that can get the ferry moving, to get the ferry back in service at the level it was prior to shutdown, we've got some staffing to do. So what we will do is we will track along with Loudoun County. As Loudoun County is moving forward with eminent domain, we're going to begin staffing back up and getting ready. Goal one, get the ferry moving again, get commerce going across this river, and then our plans are to enhance and advance the ferry, do some things down at the ferry landing to try and bring it back to the destination that it once was, whether it be canoe and kayak rental. The restaurant has been very kind to stay open, and they've been doing a great job for the community, in my opinion. Hopefully you're enjoying it, and hopefully you'll help support the restaurant and their efforts. We want to see things are enhanced down there. We want to make sure that the experience moves into the 21st century, how we collect payment, Wi-Fi capabilities at the ferry, the ability to order your food in advance so when you get there for the ferry, it can be brought out to your vehicle. Those are some of the things we have in mind to try and make the ferry more of a destination, bring it into the 21st century, and utilize automation and technology a little better. We're also going to work towards a grant to get an electric ferry, so it's a little more eco-friendly, and also see if we can get the movement between collecting payment faster and the ferry moving across the river faster, see if we can make the experience a little more timely. So I don't want to go on too long. I'm happy to answer any questions tonight. I'm an open book, so nothing's off the table. And again, I appreciate everybody's support, and the moment we can move that ferry, we'll move that ferry.
Chuck, one question that actually I got an email from a citizen asked about was that you have a background in historic preservation.
Yes.
And that, as you know, if you look at Montgomery County on a map and look at the canal, there's really no major facilities like a museum there is in Cumberland, for example. We mentioned that, and Carrie mentioned that the ferry is a living history example. There's a lot of potential for doing something with historic tourism and that kind of thing. Are you interested in that as well?
Very, very interested. And, one of the things we do with conservation easements is we're not anti-development, right? We know there needs to be growth, there needs to be development in all of the counties and all of the cities. But we like to help balance the growth. There's, as you mentioned, if you're living in Western Loudoun, if you're living over here in Poolesville, we're living in a museum. As we drive down the roads, when you think of the history and you think of what's taken place here, we're truly living and driving and walking through a museum. And as a family, we feel a certain amount of that needs to be protected. We need development, we need housing, we need affordable housing, no doubt about it. At the same time, we need to protect the history, and we need to protect open space. And so that's kind of what led us here, the background in transportation, the background in preservation, and just concerned about protecting a little bit of the past and making it a little better for the future.
Again, for the audience, if you could write, if you got a question and write it on a card, please, we have people who can pick them up for you, and I will certainly try to get every question asked I can. We've got some more speakers to come, and I hope Chuck can sit here for a while, and if there's a question that involves him, we can bring him back up.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. And now we've got a series of government leaders, and David, if you would lead us off. David Fraser Hidalgo, our delegate.
That's mine. I was wondering where that went. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to be here tonight. I know this has been a long and arduous endeavor and battle over the last, I guess, 8-9 months now. I want to start out by saying that there's a lot of information, I think, that, Chuck, that you mentioned that goes on around the internet, and here's really kind of where the rubber meets the road, and here's where you kind of cut through what's been said and what's really been going on. As many of you know, this has been a dispute between two private parties in two different states. This is not an easy thing that someone can just snap their fingers and make go away. It's been a very, very delicate subject to deal with in this entire time. With that said, I think we have played a very strategic hand over the last 6 or 8 months in trying to get this reopened. And so with that said, I mean, I think everybody pretty much knows where we are now. Chuck just pretty much told everybody where we are now. And I think that I have a lot of thank yous. While this is not a completely done deal, we have a really great roadmap, and I think it's very, very optimistic as far as eminent domain, taking control of the ferry, and making sure nothing like this ever happens to the town of Poolesville. I live in Boyd's. For those of you that don't know, I'm 15 minutes away. I've been on the ferry quite often, so it affects me, it affects everybody, and quite frankly, it affects the Commonwealth of Virginia in a very big way. So I'll just kind of go through some of the thank yous to get us where we are. On the federal side, so for those that don't know, we've had calls usually every 2 to 4 weeks since this has happened. And on those calls, there's been federal representation from the likes of Senator Van Hollen and Congressman Trone, and I know he has his representative here today, that have been on all those calls, one or the other. On the state side, it's myself as Maryland State Delegate for District 15, as well as Delegates Lily Chi, Delegate Kathleen Dumais, and Senator Brian Feldman. On the county side, because this is not only a state issue, but it's really a Loudoun County and Montgomery County issue, We've had a lot of support from the county executive's office, who's been on all the calls, always had representation. And Councilmember Andrew Friedson, I cannot say enough about Councilmember Andrew Friedson. For those of you that don't know, you have an excellent representative in Councilmember Andrew Friedson. He really has done the community proud. Like I said, it's been a long kind of negotiation and trying to figure out how the best way to move this forward. And then, of course, you have your representatives behind you that have worked so tirelessly and have held back on commenting on social media in a lot of cases, knowing that this is a much more complicated negotiation in the background, and that it's been very, very delicate to get us to the point where we are now. So, of course, you have Carrie and Jim and Link and Martin and everybody on the Poolesville commissioners that have worked so hard to get us here, to communicate as best we could. And with that said, I guess my final big thank yous would be to the Brown family, to our Brown, and the Brown family for what they've done for the community, for the state of Maryland, for the Commonwealth of Virginia, and for Loudoun County for so many years. And then our knight in shining armor, Chuck and his wife, for kind of sweeping in and re-injecting this process. I will tell you that without them coming in and re-injecting this process, I think it would be just that much harder for Loudoun County to kind of get the issues that we have on this side of the river, and how important it is for Loudoun County to know what a piece of transportation infrastructure that White's Ferry has been for hundreds of years, and how important it is to get it going. And I think without that reinvigoration and kind of looking at it from a different perspective, realizing this is not a Maryland, Virginia kind of an issue. This is an issue for everybody. And I think coming to terms with the fact that there's only so many times you can bang your head against a brick wall while trying to negotiate with someone when you realize there's just no more negotiating. And I think it's taken the other side of the river maybe a little bit longer than our side of the river to figure that out. And I think they have figured that out, and I'm so relieved and delighted that they have. With that said, I think we have a really good plan moving forward. We don't have an exact timeline. As many of you know, this is still, has to move forward as far as potentially eminent domain process. The process of Loudoun and Montgomery County working together to do all the research to get us to where we are now and get us a game plan moving forward has worked really, really well. Again, it's taken a long time to get there, but we have. And so that's about all that's really just a lot of thank yous to a lot of people for getting on these Zooms every 2 or 3 weeks for the last 6-7 months. And again, to Chuck and his wife, I can't thank you enough for coming in and reinvigorating this process and taking the bull by the horns and really really getting us where we are. I mean, I can't thank you enough. I know we enjoyed lunch last week. I really enjoyed our lunch. So, thank you. And I have to run to a friend of mine who passed away, so I have a celebration of life to go to. So if there's a quick question that I can answer, I'm happy to. Otherwise, I'll probably sneak out when nobody's looking.
David, I'm not sure if this is you or one of the other speakers, but one of the questions that was asked numerous times was, and I think it's just because they don't understand, what is the eminent domain study looking at? What are the issues it's looking at?
So the real study that was put together between Loudoun and Montgomery County was a shared study to help determine the history of White's Ferry, both on the Maryland side and the Montgomery County side, as well as the Virginia and the Loudoun County side, looking at easement rights, looking at historically all the easements that the county or the states have been given or not given, any transactions that have happened in the past, just to get a really clear idea, right? So this ferry goes back, as Carrie said, a couple hundred years. So there's a lot of transactions in that period of time. And to try and figure out exactly where we stand on the Maryland side, as well as where Virginia stands, as well as where the new owner stands, is really difficult when you have to go back through 200 years of history on two different sides of the river. And I can't stress how important it is, because that is the footing that is necessary to move forward with an eminent domain option. If you do not have solid footing, if you cannot go into court, if you cannot go to a judge and explain the history of it and have all of your ducks in a row, then you could lose 4 months or 6 months just like that. And all the work that they've been doing, the counties, the Department of Transportation on both sides, again, I can't thank Montgomery County enough because they've been on all of these calls, as well as the Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Slater, but just making sure that when there are questions that are asked, that there are answers. Because if there are not answers, then everybody in this room is going to be another couple of months, and we don't want that. We want it to be as smooth as possible and get all of our ducks in a row. I hope that answers.
Can I ask a question about just the court case in general that took place was ruled on last December? Did that not go over a lot of the history of the ferry?
I'm not as familiar with that court case, but no. I mean, again, I'm not as familiar with it, but there were so many questions on these calls. I mean, our calls would go an hour and a half each time, every 2 to 3 weeks, and the questions they were just like, well, what about this and what about that and what happened in 1957 and what happened in 1893? It just kind of keeps going and going. So.
Question as well. You were talking a lot about Loudoun County and Montgomery County and Chuck Humes. Was anybody from who owns the Virginia side invited to this meeting tonight?
Could we please use the cards, because nobody can hear you on the YouTube at all when you ask questions?
That would not be a question for me, because I didn't. Jim Brown and Link organized the meeting, so I can't speak to exactly how that happened. I don't know.
We were trying to focus in the hearing, actually looking at the future and what the future of the ferry and the solutions that we're looking at would look like for us as in the economic development impacts and those kinds of things. We did want to get into a discussion of the negotiations. That's not the purpose of the hearing. We can't do anything about that. Where that goes is between the private parties, not us. So that's why we just wanted to have it focused on the future. And Chuck owns the ferry now. He's got the investment that he has to make in it. That's where a lot of it's going to be made. So that's why we wanted to focus on that. He's basically our neighbor now.
And I think from my perspective, it makes a lot of sense to just push forward as judiciously and prudently as we can. And I was asked to basically talk about as much about the future as possible. I mean, everybody here. I have pictures as myself as a little kid on that ferry. I grew up in Wheaton. I came across this ferry. I now live in Boyd's with my kids. We go on the ferry. So it's really about the community. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I'm glad you came.
Thank you.
Next, Leo Rogers, attorney for Loudoun County, wanted to speak if he's here. I think he made it or not. He said he was, okay. Joe Kroboth, the director of Loudoun County's Transportation and Capital Infrastructure, said he wanted to speak. Do you know what happened to them, Chuck?
Yes, I think the only one from Loudoun that's going to be here is Supervisor Kirsch.
Okay, he's there. So, okay, so we could go to you then, Celia.
Great.
Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. It's great when your county attorney and head of your DTCI doesn't show up and you get to answer any of all the questions. So it's a real pleasure to be here and speak to you. I know most of you are here from Poolesville, and obviously as the representative on the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors on the other side of the river, on the other side of the Potomac, this ferry and what we're trying to accomplish and get this ferry back up and running for both sides of the community is very critical and very, very important to me and to my office and to my constituents. As soon as this ferry actually shut down, and I think some of probably the elected officials that were here, I started getting a lot of calls. And many of my constituents, many of your constituents, many of the folks here in this room, quite frankly, are severely impacted. The businesses on both sides, many of the families, they set up home with the understanding, traveling either way, that they would use this ferry on a regular basis. Some of them are traveling extra hour, sometimes 30 minutes, 45 minutes per day. I'll talk a little bit about Route 15 and how that's impacting my constituents here in a minute. But so they've really relied on it, and I've been kind of engaged in this. I know it's really important to both the Virginia and the Maryland residents. I want to thank Chair Randall, who was not able to make it tonight, who's chair of the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, who has also worked with me with both parties, with actually all parties involved in this, three-party, and now obviously 2 different states, 2 different counties, and different communities on this. Try to bring about a resolution and to get this ferry operating again. I want to thank Chuck Coons for his vision on this, for his willingness to step up, not only preserve the historic aspect of this, but really open up a corridor and a vein between us that is critically important for the people of Loudoun and the people here in Montgomery County, and specifically Poolesville. And I will tell you, I am fully committed in anything that I can do from my position on the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors to make sure this ferry operates and runs again. And so we are looking, as mentioned earlier, at a number of different options. And the big one, of course, is we are in the process of studying this. I wish Leo was here or Joe Cobras were here to speak a little bit more about that, because that study is ongoing, and certainly Chuck could answer some more questions from what he knows. But that is a study that will likely be brought to the board perhaps in the next month or two for us to, it's probably going to be an information item. We will consider that information item, and then it will require, in all likelihood, at least a majority. We have 9 members. We will need 5 members to vote to move forward with some sort of action. What that action will be, I don't know. Certainly, process of eminent domain would be something that is being looked at. And we are obviously continuing in hopes that both parties will come to an agreement that we can get this up and running. But at this point, from our positions, we are looking to do what we can to bring about a renewal of this ferry and the importance that it plays for both communities. As everyone knows, 600 to 800 cars a day travel this, and I would note that the Whites Ferry connection to Route 15 in Loudoun County, which is a major regional road connection between Maryland and Virginia in this corridor, is obviously very critical. Right now, this was taking off some of the weight. Route 15, for those of you who have driven over to Loudoun, carries about 26 to 27,000 cars per day, at least pre-COVID. That particular road is only engineered for approximately 12,000 cars per day. So, and I know from the Maryland side, and again, all this whole transportation project ties in here. About 21,000 cars travel on the Maryland side of Route 15 each day, and we're currently in the process of widening Route 15 on the Loudoun County side. But even with the widening projects, that's going to be full by 2040, unless we're going to remain in this whole COVID environment where a lot of people are working at home. We're going to run into, which I hope that's not the case, by 2040. Hopefully we're not sitting here then wearing masks, but if we are waiting that long, we're once again, at least on the Loudoun side, going to be at capacity. And so we're going to need to be looking at other options. And quite frankly, I would be remiss if I did not mention the need at some point for a bridge crossing between Maryland and Virginia. If our jurisdictions are truly serious about mitigating congestion, providing solid solutions for our residents, we must start discussions between our political entities in this vein. We owe it to our residents on both sides of the river. We suffer through this congestion on a regular basis. And obviously this Whites Ferry a passage over this river, which has been going on, I think was mentioned, well over 200 years, is just a small part, but a very, very important part, a very historical part. And I am committed, and I make that commitment today to you as citizens on this side, and certainly to my constituents in Loudoun County, that I will do everything in my power to ensure that this ferry is up and running again. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you.
Okay, one question that was asked numerous times was that the only thing that's been mentioned tonight in terms of the study is condemnation, but aren't there other things like government subsidies of some type or a contract by the government, things like that are being looked at?
Yeah, there's a wide variety of things. Essentially, there was an item that came before the board. We voted to have our staff look at various options. Obviously, condemnation is one of those options, but yes, with ultimately the goal in the end and in mind to open the ferry in one way or another. I mean, certain other landings, but many of those things are quite frankly impractical. The real, I think, crux, as Mr. Coons mentioned, is to open up this particular piece of land on the other side of the ferry where it's currently landing, and how that happens could be a number of different ways, but obviously as a government entity, we have very limited options, and as was mentioned earlier, eminent domain would be one of those. But of course, we have to make sure, as was mentioned previously, that we do this legally and correct and see what other options are available. Yeah. Any other questions?
I don't know if you can answer this question, and maybe that's for you, Chuck, but it's also been asked a number of times in these cards tonight that if the study comes out at the end of September, and then there's any kind of legal process, it sounds like it may be taking the better part, or at least part of 2022 till we get back to running the ferry. Does that sound like it's a realistic timeframe?
The sooner the better.
That's what we want, but that's.
And again, that would probably be a better question sent if media would like to pose that question to our county attorney. Obviously, it depends on all parties involved. What legal wrangling may or may not occur. Again, that is one option. We are hoping there are other less stringent options that are available to us, but certainly that is a process. I am a lawyer by trade. I'm not an eminent domain lawyer by any stretch. And so if I stated exactly how long that would take, I would probably be committing malpractice. So I'll choose not to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Chuck, did you want to respond?
I spoke to Leo Rogers, and I spoke to a few members of Loudoun County. I speak to them every week on this topic, I promise you. And let me back up for a minute. Supervisor Kirshner, thank you for taking time to come on this side of the river and support the cause. Thank you.
Drive around.
Yeah, me too. And trust me, I thought about it every mile. From what I'm told, according to Leo Rogers in the county, is the study is underway. The study will be wrapping up in September. This should be in front of the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors to vote on in December, in their December meeting. So what's really important is for the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors to hear from you. And I know you're on this side of the river, but they care about you just so they care about as people on the other side of the river. They need to hear how important it is to your families, to your businesses, to your success, to the commuters, to the community. So there's a number of emails that we can get you. There's one email that will go to every Board of Supervisor. What is that email? bos@loudoun.gov. That will go to every supervisor that will be voting on this initiative.
Thank you.
Will that be on your website? Did you set up that link? Good point, thank you. That'd be great.
I don't think there are any other government witnesses that wanted to speak tonight. I know that there are Montgomery County Department of Transportation people here, but they didn't want to speak, I don't think, tonight, so I think that's all the government representatives. We do have 3 local representatives who can really speak to some of the issues for us as Poolesville and a Western County area, the impact, economic impact, the historical impacts, the importance of it to our daily lives. So if Tom, you wouldn't come up, please. Tom Kettler is the head of the Poolesville Chamber of Commerce. Local businessman as well, and can speak to the economic impact in particular.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you, Link. Yeah, I am Tom Kettler here tonight wearing a couple hats. First is I'm a local home builder and developer based in Montgomery County, lifetime resident of Montgomery County. I've been working in Poolesville for 30 years. I've been taking the ferry for probably 60 years. I'm also here primarily in my role as recently taken over as president of the Poolesville Area Chamber of Commerce. Now, the Poolesville Area Chamber of Commerce represents the whole western Montgomery County. We have right now 120 members of the chamber that is everywhere from a restaurant to real estate company to a hardware store to home-based businesses to churches. So we represent a wide cross-section of the organizations within our region, and obviously the ferry closing has a major impact. I would be remiss in not thanking all the folks tonight for putting this together, for Link especially putting it together, for all the local politicians, both sides of the river, who are working to get this resolved. I remember being on the Zoom call, the commissioners behind me at the, I think their New Year's Eve party that last year was on the Zoom call talking about White's Ferry. So that was I'm sure, a fun New Year's Eve for them, but in this COVID world. So with that, Poolesville, you hear people talk Poolesville as kind of the heart of the agricultural reserve, and we're right in the middle of 91,000 acres of agricultural land that was set aside going all the way back to 1980. And Poolesville really has three arteries, and if you sort of, use the image of a heart, you've got three arteries coming into this town. You've got the artery coming from Rockville, coming up 28 and 107. You've got the artery from the north coming down from Frederick 85 and coming down that way. And the third artery, of course, is White's Ferry Road that heads down to the river, across the Potomac River and on into Leesburg and Loudoun County. And basically one of those three arteries was severed back in December of last year. It was very shocking, I know, the local community. And from a business perspective, I build homes for a living. I've been working out here for probably 30 years. People who buy my homes, some of them work in Maryland, some of them work in Virginia. Some people locate here and want to work over in the Loudoun corridor over in Herndon and Reston, and they were counting on the ferry to get over. Of course, now they have to go looping all the way around across Point of Rocks, which is quite a expedition, as we all know. Back to the local businesses in town. I've actually spent the last week kind of going up and down Fisher Avenue in Poolesville, talking to the different businesses in town to see what impact, real impact that the ferry closing has had. I was talking to the owner of Bassett's restaurant right down here at the four-way stop. He estimated that he's lost about 20% of his business since the ferry closed. And if anybody knows the restaurant business, first they were hit by COVID. So it's amazing that any restaurants are open, but then you got 20% reduction after that. So they really took a hit. I've talked to the folks over the Asian House of Poolesville, or affectionately known as the AHOP in Poolesville. They're down about 20% too. And businesses you wouldn't think about, but I stopped and talked to, and that's the way Poolesville is. Poolesville is a small town. There's some national chains here, but there are also some local folks that have owned businesses for years. And there's John at John's Hardware. Anybody from Poolesville knows John. I went to saw John earlier today. He said his business is probably down about 10%. People coming through town, heading to Virginia, or coming back from Virginia. So it really has had a very real and serious impact. And obviously, from a chamber's perspective, the fair can't open soon enough, and we thank Chuck and his wife for working on it. We're hoping who are also members of the chamber, by the way, and thank you for that. So, and we're hopeful that this will be brought to a resolution before too long, and we can get that flow going back across the river. So, thanks for allowing me to speak for you tonight, and thank you very much.
One of the things that really has been important in Poolesville for a long time is our focus on history, and we have a great little history society here, the Historic Medley District. Maureen O'Connell is the head of that, and she's going to talk about some of the aspects of this from the history standpoint, because there's some real opportunities here, I think, for us as a community to work with the ferry on ideas on how to promote the history that ferries represent and the C&O Canal. And so I'd like to have Maureen go ahead and start.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I'm very glad to be here tonight, and I'm honored to have Chuck and his wife here, because you've done so much to to save our area. But tonight I want to speak to you. Actually, Tom talked about the economic impact of closing of the ferry on Poolesville, but I want to talk to you about the impact of closing of White's Ferry on tourism to historic sites in Poolesville and the surrounding area. The ferry offers an historical transportation link to this area and its rich historical legacy on both sides of the river. Drive, bike, or walk off the ferry on the Maryland side, and you enter one of the most historic areas in Montgomery County. I'll add in there, you can also ride your horse off it. I'm a member of the Potomac Hunt, and about 20-some years ago, we were reenacting when Potomac Hunt went over to the Loudoun Hunt for a hunt. So about 30 of us, we crossed the ferry on our horses, which was very interesting to see if the horse was how he's going to handle that. So Poolesville is the gateway town to this historic area. Many historic preservation organizations, such as Heritage Montgomery, the Sugarloaf Citizens Association, Montgomery's Countryside Alliance, Sugarloaf Countryside Conservancy, and Historic Medley District work throughout the year to protect and maintain these treasured sites and values to keep history alive. And there also are many African-American settlements in this area that date back to the Civil War. Now, I'm going to speak to you a little bit about, since I'm kind of speaking for Historic Medley District, it's located in Poolesville and was founded in 1974 by a number of residents up here who saw what was happening to the historic sites in the area. They were falling down, they were being neglected. So this group wanted to preserve, maintain many of these buildings, objects, and structures that contribute to the historic character of the area. Historic Medley District, we maintain the John Poole House, which you can see, where is he? Right back there, and it was built in 1793. It's the oldest building in Poolesville. And over the years, we also own the old town hall, which is also up there, which used to be a bank, and then it was actually the town hall for the town of Poolesville. And now HMD maintains it as a museum, as a kind of replica of, or it holds relics from Poolesville role during the Civil War. And throughout the year, HMD hosts many social and educational events for the community, for people from Virginia and from the whole area. And since 1980, Historic Medley District has leased from the Seneca State Park systems a Seneca schoolhouse. I don't know if any of you are aware of that. It was built in 1865. It's right there in the intersection of River Road and Partnership Road. It's a one-room schoolhouse, one of the few in the country that is still operating. And it was built by Mr. Darby in order to educate the children of the children of the men who worked at the Ferry and at Seneca Quarry, and also the local farmers. HMD in 1980 complete and renovated. We lease it from the park systems, and every year we host several thousand children to the school, where they can travel back in time to experience with the teacher in period dress what a typical day would be like in a school in 1865. The boys and girls come from public, private, and homeschool groups from Maryland, DC, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. And the easiest, most enjoyable, and educational way for the children from Virginia to get here is, of course, by the ferry. The children love coming over the ferry. So the closing of the ferry will significantly impact the availability of these children to come over for field trips, which they love, coming to the schoolhouse. Now, HMD maintains a login book at all of our three properties: the schoolhouse, the John Poole House, and the town hall. And you'd be amazed how many visitors come from Virginia, and most of them come via the ferry. So also you might ask, what is the value of tourism to Poolesville? Tom talked about the value to the economic side of closing the ferry to Poolesville. But tourism actually is one of the economic engines that is supporting the economic health of Poolesville. Many people, as Tom said, when they come here to Poolesville, even as tourists, they also support the businesses up here. So keeping the ferry open is, here again, we thank Mr. Kuhn for taking this under his wing to try to do it. Because the ferry is just one more link and tool to the mission of HMD and all the other historic preservation groups. Preserving the history of any area, I think, and I particularly think this, is increasingly important today with the many demands and distractions of all of us have with our high-tech lifestyle. People often forget, I think, or ignore what came before them. And at the John Poole House, visitors can see and feel the way families lived back in the 1800s, where they came to the John Poole House and they bought soap, candles, cloth, eggs, and the farmers came here and bought materials for their farms. John Poole and his wife grew flowers, vegetables, and herbs in the backyard of the John Poole house. And with those, they used them for culinary, medicinal, and cloth drying purposes. At the Seneca School, children see how students in 1868 studied reading, writing, arithmetic, and also got a very good dose of good manners without the use of iPhones and computers. All this should not be allowed to be forgotten. And in closing, I want to say that White's Ferry is a vital link to the chain of this history we've been talking about tonight. We need White's Ferry. We need Mr. Kuhn, not just for commuting business people, but for all residents on both sides of the ferry. Thank you.
Maureen, I'm going to get some more questions here, but one of the things that intrigues me about the ferry, and Carrie mentioned it, and I think Chuck has referenced it too, is the living history nature of the ferry. You were talking about the John Poole House and actually experiencing life by going into it. And one of the things that in the ferry that people don't realize probably is on the right-hand side, there used to be a granary there. It's now just a foundation, but they used to take grain from across the river from the ferry and put it there and then take it down to Washington to be processed. So the idea of doing some work to actually promote the history that the ferry represents, and you know, that there's no other ferry left on the Potomac River, and the idea that it made our commerce here work in those 1924 and those times is very powerful. Are you guys looking at that in HMD?
Yes, I think Link and I talked about this, and we hadn't talked to Mr. Kuhn, and I talked to Sarah Rogers. Sarah Rogers is Executive Director of Heritage Montgomery, and a lot of the interpretive signs you see at a lot of places in the county, she and I have worked on creating them. And Sarah and I, and a lot of other people in various historic preservation groups here, would like to see at the Maryland landing side of the ferry some more, not kiosks, but more information about the history of the ferries that used to cross over there, and also remind people, hey, you're coming now into a very historic area, and tell them all about what they can see, not just in Poolesville, but the rest of the area up here. There's just in Poolesville alone, the town has identified 18 historic homes. Some are maintained, some are not maintained, but still, it's a tremendous, for a small town, it's a tremendously historical town, and I think that we could hopefully work together to build on that.
Thank you, and we've already been delivered 2 of the large posters.
Okay.
And we're waiting on the framing, and we will be putting them at the ferry landing.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Thank you, okay.
Finally, we have a local leader here who's both a minister and deeply involved with and understands a lot of the history in our area, Chuck Copeland, and I'd like him to give some remarks about the impact of the ferry on his church and his life.
Hello. I got it on my back, my butt. Where? All right. I thought I was clear there. Hello, everybody. I'm Pastor Chuck Copeland, better known around here as Pastor Chuck. I'm a resident. I've been up here in Poolesville since 1992. I've had 3 of my 4 children graduate from that high school. I am a retired corrections officer in Montgomery County, so I pay my dues. And, you know, I didn't grow up in Poolesville. The property that I live on has been in my family since 1877. It was bought by my great-great-grandfather, Albert Thompson, who came from a plantation up there at the corner of Comus and Peachtree Road, which was called Thompson's Corner. I live on White's Ferry Road, a few miles from the ferry. And I know the difference. I mean, I can go out there and stand on those 2 yellow lines in the middle of the road right at this time of day for probably 15 minutes with my hands in my pockets and no traffic. And so, you know, on the weekends, I can tell you, I could see from my front yard, a lot of cars going this way with Virginia tags and a lot of cars going that way with Maryland tags. And it was a shock to this community when that ferry shut down. I have come to give you a real-life perspective on what it's like to live in this area and have the ferry shut down. One perfect example. One night I got home from a long, long day. I had so many things to do. I got home, I sat down, it was 9:45. My youngest daughter is 20 years old, called me, she's 21 now. Dad, I'm broke down. Where are you? In Virginia. Where? I don't know. Google it. Something. She goes, I'm not too far from the outlets. And I'm thinking, oh, great. I can get on no, I can't. No, I can't. So that time of night, I had to get in my car and go all the way through Point of Rocks, up and down Hill and Dale, across the river, all the way to get to my daughter, which would have taken me maybe a half hour if the ferry was open. My oldest daughter, who has 3 of my 4 grandchildren, her husband is an air traffic controller. They just moved back here from Memphis because he has a job at Dulles now. They just got a place last week, unbeknownst to me, in Leesburg. Okay? From where I live to get to Leesburg would take me 15 minutes, right? To go across the ferry. One of my neighbors is right there. Mason, say hi. He owns a farm down there. Okay? This is impacting them as well. You know? Yeah. I mean, and it's very disheartening to be in this area. And honestly, it's been kind of like, the reason that we have fair access and the reason that I'm a part of fair access is because this area gets short shrift. And we have been getting short shrift for a long time. But at the end of the day, Link always tells me, it doesn't do us any good to bellyache. We need to have some solutions. We need to put some pressure on these politicians. I can say that because I'm not one of them. And so I really, really want you guys to understand that as a town, as an area, the Ag Reserve is not just Poolesville. The Ag Reserve is Poolesville, Barnesville, Boyd's. It's a bunch of little areas that all create one big area, and we love our area. We love the fact that people can come across the water when they want to and go back when they want to. I was at the river one day fishing with my son. My son had a back spasm. He couldn't move. He's a lot bigger than me, so I couldn't help him. I called 911. Guess what came up? Loudoun County. When I Google on my phone the closest Walmart, guess what comes up? Loudoun County. See, these people act like, shutting the ferry off was some, those people, they're fine. They can go around. It changed our whole life. It changed our lives in tangible ways, and not for the better. So I'm just thankful to you, Mr. Kuhn. Your name's Chuck, so you can't be all bad. Like I said, I didn't grow up here, but those while I was sitting there, I don't have any notes. I was thinking, what am I going to say? And I felt, and Link knew. He's like, you only got 5 minutes, Chuck. I said, okay. So, good luck with that. But I love this community, okay? I love Poolesville. I did not like Poolesville when I grew up because I was from Rockville, the city. I came up here and it was like, okay, all right, what do we do? And so I moved here many years later. I've raised 3 of my children here. 3 graduates from Poolesville High School. I work security at the high school now, and this is my town. I had an opportunity to work at many other places, but I worked here. This is my town. My church is planted in this town. We changed the name of my church from Hosanna Worship Center to Hosanna Community Church. Our church was planted in a little historic church right there right by Martinsburg Road on White's Ferry Road. Okay? My heart is in this. If the ferry doesn't open, it's going to be a hard deal. And just like the young lady spoke about the history, when they go into that school, kids experience the history of what it was like to be in a building like that. When they get on that ferry, it ain't going fast, And they're allowed that I remember my grandson, the first time, my oldest, he got out. He was like, Pop, can I get out? I'm like, yeah, go ahead. And he's over there looking, and he's like, it doesn't look like we're moving. I said, we're moving, It's just, I say all that to say, there's a lot. You heard people stand up here and say, I've been getting on a ferry for 60 years. I remember when I was a kid, from all walks of life. This thing impacts this entire area. and beyond. And so it's just important to me that you guys hear that there are real people being impacted in real ways negatively because that ferry is not open. And we hope y'all can get it together. I really appreciate everybody coming out. I didn't expect to see this many people, but thank y'all so much. And look, let's stick together and get this going forward, Poolesville. All right? Let's go.
We won't ask questions because the answers will probably be 5 minutes long. No. I don't think there are any other speakers that have signed up tonight to speak. I don't know if any of the commissioners wanted to offer comments. We're a committee of the town, so if any of you want to make any comments to close out this meeting, that would be fine too. I thought Carrie did a great job opening it up, and set the stage very well. Anything else anybody wants to?
Well, I'd like to say something here now. I think we're being optimistic about our timeline.
No one can hear you on YouTube, so you have to come up to a microphone.
I'm sorry. I guess I'm a little uncomfortable in front of crowds. I think we're being, whenever we ask, like, folks on either side, Virginia or here, about a timeline, it seems like folks are being optimistic. The last legal battle lasted something like 15 years. So we say about, the study's going to be done in a couple of months, and then what happens? We're going in the court. I know you said you guys have done a lot, but I'm going to follow what Chuck said, put a little pressure, and wondering if you would agree to do like some kind of arbitration or binding arbitration, and maybe you can work with the Rockland side, and if you could, if we could do that, like I don't think a court battle is going to open. We're going to be here in 2023, 2027. We're going to be in a meeting like this. So I would just, since you're here, I'll ask you, would you agree to that? I know that's maybe not standard business negotiating tactics, but that might help two sides who, can agree to agree, and then we can get back to life.
Great. Happy to answer that.
Yeah, please do.
So I think you've got a very valid point, right? Everything takes longer than we all intend. From what Loudoun County tells us, it'll be in front of the December board meeting for vote. From there is a process that has to take place. So what they're telling me is it would be Q1 of 2022 before the ferry was probably moving, if they vote to move forward with eminent domain, and if eminent domain is successful. So you've got a very valid point there. That's not our only option. That's not the only card we have to play. So I want to be careful what I say here publicly. We're very confident with the support we're getting from Montgomery County, from Loudoun County, and what Loudoun County is moving towards. If that fails, it's not the only thing we're relying on. We do have options 2, 3, and 4 that we'll move to. I heard everyone tonight, and I can't agree with you more. If I didn't agree with you, we wouldn't have made the investment in the ferry. And when Stacy and I purchased the ferry, we have 9 children. And I went home and we were kind of excited about the investment, what we were doing to protect the ferry. And I told my son, I said, well, we bought White's Ferry. And he's like, you didn't buy a ferry. A ferry has 2 landings, Dad. You bought the Maryland shoreline and an old boat. You don't have a ferry. And that rings in my head as we're moving towards getting the ferry open. But I'm sorry.
You need to put him to work for your company.
Right. You've got a good point. He is. Thank you. But I hear you loud and clear. I really want to make sure the Loudoun Board of Supervisors hears you loud and clear through the email we talked about. I will post on our website, on our Facebook pages, when the board is going to be making the vote. It would be awesome if some of you all could make the hour trek across the river and speak that night so they understand the impact it's having on everything we heard here tonight. I'm not kidding. I'm committed to making sure the ferry opens. And I'm not saying that to get the team excited. I'm telling you, one way or the other, this ferry is going to move, and it's going to move before summer of '22. One way or another, that ferry will be open and moving before summer of '22. That's my commitment to Poolesville, to my family, to the Loudoun County community. We're going to get support from Loudoun. If I'm overly optimistic and we don't, we have other alternatives we will take.
So is that a yes or no? Would you sit down and have a third party who could be neutral and ensure fair access?
Yeah.
Would you do it?
You know, I hate to ever say no, right? Because I think you always need to leave options open. And I want to be careful. I've always learned that you never regret taking the high road. So I don't want to air dirty laundry or the history of these battles before my time or during my time. What I will say is I have zero optimism that continuing to try and negotiate directly with or without arbitration mediation with the Virginia shoreline will be successful in opening the ferry. So I do not, I mean, I've tried. I do not think it's a good use of time. I don't think it's a good use of funds. I've exhausted my abilities to be successful there. Whether it's trying to purchase the farm, whether it's trying to purchase a reasonable landing right, reasonable terms. You'll see it in the Loudoun Times-Mirror if you didn't already see it. We did receive a letter from the Rockland Group. If we took that deal, you all wouldn't use the ferry anyways. You couldn't afford it. Everything has gone up. Everything has gone up in your life, in my life, in the last 12 months, right? Think about the minimum wage that went up, right? Not that the workers at the ferry are making minimum wage, but as you all know, when minimum wage goes up, all wages go up, right? It has a chain reaction. Fuel's up, insurance is up. The rules and regulations governing the ferry have changed, right? Where the ferry could run with a certain staff before, it has to run with a larger staff now. So we're already facing challenges of reopening the ferry and keeping it affordable for the public. If we paid $2 million, $2 million, you'll see it in the paper today, for the Virginia landing rights, we would have to quadruple the price of utilizing that ferry today. Quadruple it. So opening a ferry that you all can't afford to utilize isn't going to help the community. Pastor Chuck, a lot of the people that are using that ferry are coming over here for agricultural jobs, right? Or they're going over there for restaurant jobs, right? They can't pay what we would have to charge if we pay $2 million for the Virginia landing rights. So Loudoun County is going to support us. Make sure they hear from you of the importance.
Just wanted to follow up on a couple of things that Chuck mentioned. The first is he called me, or I called him, I think, shortly after I discovered he had made a bid or purchased it. And I said, "You sure you want to get into this?" And he says, "I may need my head examined." So I'm not sure if that's still the sentiment, but again, thank you for your continued commitment. I just heard from our Director of Transportation, and I believe we're actually going to have an information item initially come in as early as potentially October. Now that time frame can change, and what that basically means is this is what we found out in the study. This is what it means. These are what staff is making a number of different options, or this is the only option that's available, whatever that may be. Obviously, I'm not going to speak to that because I don't know that. We do have regular public comment, and again, as Chuck mentioned, coming to Loudoun County during our public comment when this particular item is on, obviously this is very, very important to this community. You're obviously not constituents of the elected officials there, but I think it would be, I think they would certainly care how much this is impacting your community. So your voice certainly will be heard. And a little bit of I historically worked as a lobbyist. I generated one of the largest grassroots network in the history of America. And I will tell you, elected officials listen to constituents, and they listen to people when they speak up. So don't be afraid to do that. Obviously make it effective. Come speak, let them know how it's impacting you personally. I think personal stories are very, very important. Perhaps your business, perhaps your community, perhaps the various sentiments. So do not be afraid to speak up. And as was mentioned, a lot of it does lie with the Board of Supervisors in Loudoun County. So I would certainly offer it. You know my commitment to reopening the ferry. But obviously many of my colleagues, I think, would be important. They don't represent this particular district, but for Chair Randall, who represents the county at large. Obviously, that would be important for them and for me to hear from you. So I would appreciate those comments as well to the Board of Supervisors, whether in person or by email. Thank you.
You want to?
Everybody, hi, Jim Brown. I want to say to all the people in this room and the people that are in the hallway too, that it's only because of your advocacy and your help to push us, the Fair Access Committee, as well as my fellow town commissioners, to lead the fight and lead the battle and help spur on our elected officials to take action and do what we need to do to bring the ferry back to life. Thank God we've gotten two great stewards for it, and we're super excited about that. And thank you for putting up with all my emails. I appreciate it up front.
Thank you for your concern.
Yeah, thank you. I'll keep it short. Fair Access and the town commissioners will definitely be organizing and letting you know, as Montgomery County residents, how you can advocate and how you can bring together the support that we're going to need. As our Board of Supervisor has let us know, our advocacy is going to need to continue. We're going to need to step it up. Chuck's told us he's already laid down the gauntlet. He's put the money out, so we got to do the effort. And we're ready to do that, as you guys know. Fair Access has we've come from nothing to creating a board that advocates for the entire up-county region. You know, we're getting a new high school. We didn't expect this to fall into our laps, but we're ready to jump on it, and we've been jumping on it, and we're going to need all of your help. So the people in the hallway, the people that are listening on YouTube, everybody that's here in this room right now, pay attention to your Facebook posts. You're going to be hearing from us. We need you to sign up for our various things that we will put out there for our campaigns. I was getting texted the whole time that the meeting was going on for people saying, tell me what we need to do. And we're going to try and do all of it. Organize a bus to go over to Loudoun County. We've never done that before, so that could be fun. And we're also going to be able to be out there for in terms of our muster email campaigns and direct individual emails from up-county residents. So we're very excited to be on your team, and we're super excited to have you on our team, and the rest of you all out there, you guys know what you need to do. We've done it. We just need to keep doing it, and we need to answer the call when we put it out there. So again, thanks to Link Hoeing for putting this together, all of my fellow commissioners for their hard work on this, the various politicians on the Maryland side, our speakers, everybody involved. We are all one team. We will get this ferry up and running again, and we're super excited about it. So that's it for me. Thanks, guys.
So what about the questions that were written down? Were those?
A lot of them are on the same point, which is on the negotiations. We are not here to talk about the negotiations. Most of the cards are about the negotiations. We're not here to talk about that. We cannot do anything about that.
Okay, so we're not going to address the infrastructure problem with White's Ferry Road. And it's just been fixed after 45
That's true.
years.
Yeah.
And don't forget
Maybe as
Loudoun
old as
County,
the
because
ferry
that
is.
their side.
And we're opening a commuter road, 800 cars a day. We've admitted that here today in this meeting. How do we address that? It's unsafe. There's no lanes. There's bicyclists that like to ride there. I'm fourth generation on the farm across the road.
You want to get up to the microphone? That would be great. We can't hear you on YouTube. That's the problem. So, but it's a good point. They have fixed it. I don't know when it's going to be.
How do we fix the safety?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
And move my farm equipment off the road. It is a nightmare.
It's a good question.
And it's the ag reserve. It's our ag reserve.
But it is an example of the kind of things that we got to keep advocating on. You're right. It's another one of those things. I agree.
Don't work today.
Right.
It just don't with our farm equipment. That's all I'd like to say.
It's a good point.
Thank you. Good point.
Yeah, I am sorry, but most of the questions were on the negotiations. We cannot do anything about that. We're here to try to look at the future. That's why we had a lot of discussion about the history, about the economic impact.
And I'm looking to the future.
Yeah, that's what we're focused on. So we can't do anything about the negotiations.
Well, thank you.
So thank you for making that comment. It was a good comment. And I don't think there's any other comments at this point. I really appreciate people being here tonight. Thank you for being on YouTube, and thank you for being here in person. It was a great opportunity for everyone. Thanks for coming.